The marketplace was loud, full of glowing signs and shouting voices, but 3 alien widows moved through it quietly. Their steps were slow, their clothes were torn, and their eyes carried both fear and shame. They had been walking since morning, stopping at one stall after another, begging for work. Each time the answer was the same. "No jobs here," one merchant said, waving his hand as if shooing away flies. Another sneered, "Widows bring bad luck. Leave before you curse my business." The youngest widow held her hands together, trying not to cry. The oldest whispered softly, "Please, we just need a job. We can clean, cook, lift boxes, anything." But no one listened. Crowds of aliens passed them, too busy to care. Some whispered cruel words behind their backs, laughing at their misery. Others looked away, pretending not to see. To most, they were invisible. To others, they were a joke. The widows were tired and hungry. Their stomachs growled, but they had no money even for cheap food. Each rejection felt like a stone pressing heavier on their hearts. The memory of their husbands haunted them. Once they had strong families, safe homes, and respect. But all that ended in a single moment, the mining accident. The mines collapsed, crushing their husbands beneath tons of rock. Officials called it an unfortunate event, but the widows knew the truth. No one cared to investigate. With their men gone, they lost everything: home, respect, and hope. The sun dipped lower in the sky. Shadows stretched across the market floor. The 3 women stopped at the corner of a food stall. The smell of roasted meat burned their empty stomachs. The youngest widow pressed her forehead against her hands. "No one wants us, maybe. Maybe it would be better if we just—" She could not finish her sentence. The middle widow grabbed her hand. "Don't say that. We promised to survive. For them." Still, despair was heavy in their eyes. From across the street, someone was watching. He was not alien. He was human. Tall, with sharp eyes, dusty clothes, and a travel bag slung over his shoulder. He had come to the market looking for spare parts for his small cargo ship. But now he stood still, his gaze fixed on the 3 widows. At first he thought they were beggars. But then he heard the youngest one's trembling voice. "Please, we just need a job." The human frowned. He had seen desperation before. But there was something different here. Why did every merchant turn them away so harshly? Why did people act as if these women carried disease or a curse? He stepped closer, curious. As he walked, he heard whispers from the crowd. "Fools if they hire them," one alien muttered. "They'll bring disaster." Another spat on the ground. "Widows from the mines. Everyone knows what happens to anyone who gives them work." The human ignored the whispers. He stopped in front of the 3 widows. His sudden presence made them freeze. They had seen humans before, rarely, but none had ever spoken to them. "Why is no one giving you work?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. The widows looked at each other, unsure if they should answer. Finally, the oldest lifted her head. "Because we are cursed. At least that's what they say." Her voice cracked, heavy with years of sorrow. "Our husbands died in the mines. Since then, no one trusts us. No one will hire us." The human studied their faces. They were thin, pale, and exhausted, but he also saw something else. Strength hidden under layers of pain. These women had not given up completely. Even in shame, they kept asking, kept searching. The youngest whispered, "Please, we can work hard. We can clean, cook, carry, just don't send us away." Her words hit him like a knife. He thought of his own ship. It was small, and running it alone was difficult. He often needed extra hands but could never afford professional workers. Maybe these 3 could help him. But a thought troubled him. If everyone hated them, would hiring them bring trouble to him too? Before he could decide, laughter rose from behind. A fat alien merchant shouted, "Human, don't waste your time. They're bad luck. Hire them and you'll lose your ship, maybe your life." The crowd chuckled, shaking their heads. The widows lowered their gaze, ready to be rejected once more. They expected him to turn away, just like the others. But the human did not move. He kept looking at them, his mind racing. He had seen cruelty in many worlds, but something inside him told him this was worse. This was not about bad luck. This was about fear and lies. Finally he spoke. "Come with me." The widows gasped, their eyes widening. You want to hire us?" The middle one asked. "Yes," the human said. "I need help on my ship. If you work hard, you'll have food, shelter, and pay." The crowd burst into laughter and mocking cries. "Foolish human," someone shouted. "He's doomed now." But the human ignored them. He extended his hand. The three widows stared at it, trembling. Slowly, the youngest reached out, her thin fingers brushing against his palm. Tears welled in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, and in that moment, the marketplace seemed to fall silent. What the human did not know was this choice, this small act of kindness, would change his life forever. The human's words hung heavy in the air. "Come with me." The three alien widows could hardly believe what they had just heard. For hours they had begged and pleaded, only to be mocked and cursed, and now one stranger, this human, had given them what no one else dared to offer. A chance. The youngest widow trembled as she whispered again, You really mean it?" The human nodded firmly. "Yes, I don't care what others say. If you're willing to work, then I'm willing to give you a place." The crowd around them exploded with jeers and laughter. Merchants shook their heads, slapping their thighs as if this was the funniest thing they had seen all week. "Foolish human," one shouted. "Mark my words, he'll regret it." Another yelled, "They'll curse his ship." A third spat, his voice filled with hatred. The widows flinched at every word. They had heard such curses so many times before. Their hearts told them to stay silent, to keep their heads down, to not believe this offer was real. But deep inside, a spark of hope flickered. The human ignored the noise. He extended his hand once more. His eyes carried no fear, no disgust, only determination. "Well, do you want to live like this forever? Or do you want a chance to stand again?" The oldest widow, who had been quiet until now, raised her chin slowly. Her voice was calm but strong. "We will work. We will not disappoint you." The human gave a small nod. "Then follow me." He led them through the busy streets, away from the laughter and mocking stares. The widows followed closely, their steps uncertain but filled with new energy. For the first time in months, they were not being chased away. As they walked, the youngest whispered to the middle widow, "Do you think he's serious? What if he changes his mind?" The middle one answered softly, "Even if he does, at least someone looked at us with kindness, even for a moment." The human heard their whispers but said nothing. Inside, his mind was racing. He had always been careful about who he trusted. Life among the stars was dangerous, and trust could cost a person their life. Yet something about these women made him act without hesitation. He couldn't stand the way the crowd mocked them, and deep down he knew the merchants were lying. No one was cursed simply because they were widows. They reached the docking bay. The human ship stood waiting, small but sturdy. Its hull carried scars from years of travel, yet its engines hummed with power. The widows stopped, staring at it with wide eyes. For them who had slept on the streets and eaten scraps, this ship looked like a palace. This is yours?" the youngest asked. "Yes," the human replied. "It's not much, but it's home," the middle widow whispered. "And you will let us stay here?" He gave a half smile. "That depends. Do you know how to clean, cook, or carry crates?" The oldest answered at once. "We can do all of that. We will work day and night if we must." "Good," the human said. "Then you'll have food, a bed, and safety. But I'll warn you, life on a ship isn't easy. You'll have to earn every meal." The widows nodded quickly, their faces glowing with relief. Even hard work sounded like heaven compared to hunger and rejection. As the human opened the hatch, the youngest suddenly fell to her knees. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Thank you. We don't deserve this. Everyone says we are cursed. But you..." Her voice broke. The human reached down and helped her up. His grip was steady, his voice calm. "You're not cursed. You're just unlucky. There's a difference. Bad luck can change." The words struck them like lightning. For so long they had believed the whispers, believed they were doomed. But now a stranger had given them something they had almost lost completely: dignity. They stepped inside the ship. The interior was cramped but warm. Small bunks lined the walls. The control panels flickered with lights, and a faint hum filled the air. The widows touched everything with wonder, as if afraid it might vanish. The human showed them around. "You'll sleep here. You'll eat in that corner. Don't touch the controls unless I say so. Tomorrow morning we have a delivery run. If you prove yourselves, this arrangement will continue." The widows nodded eagerly. "We won't fail," the oldest promised. But as the human prepared the ship for launch, he noticed something. From the docking bay windows, several merchants were still watching, their faces twisted with anger. He could almost hear their thoughts. "That human will pay for hiring them." The human frowned. Trouble was coming. He could feel it, but he pushed the thought aside. For now, he had given them shelter. That night, the widows ate their first real meal in months. They slept in real beds, not on cold streets. And for the first time in what felt like forever, they dreamed not of death, but of a future. Yet outside, rumors spread quickly. Word traveled from merchant to merchant, from planet to planet. A human had hired the cursed widows. Some laughed. Others grew angry, and in the shadows, powerful eyes turned toward the human's ship, planning what to do about him. The widows did not know it yet, but their new beginning would soon bring danger greater than they had ever faced before. The next morning, the ship's engines roared to life. The widows stood near the cargo bay, clutching each other nervously. They had never been on a ship before, never felt the trembling of metal under their feet or the rising hum of thrusters. To them, space was something distant and unreachable. Now they were inside it, about to travel among stars. The human sat in the pilot's seat, his hands steady on the controls. "We have a delivery to make," he said. His voice was calm but firm. "Food crates for a colony station 2 jumps away. If we're lucky, we'll make it in 3 days. If not..." He stopped there, letting the silence finish the warning. The widows exchanged worried looks. "If not," the youngest asked. "Then we deal with trouble," the human replied simply. The ship lifted, engines glowing bright as it broke free from the planet's pull. The widows pressed their faces against the small windows, eyes wide. Stars stretched across the dark, endless sky. It was both terrifying and beautiful. "Stay close," the human told them. "Watch, learn, and work. That's how you'll earn your keep." The journey began smoothly. The widows worked hard, just as they promised. One cleaned the narrow halls, scrubbing until the floors shined. Another cooked simple meals from the supplies, serving them hot and fresh. The third carried heavy crates, her muscles trembling but her spirit determined. The human watched quietly. For months he had lived alone, eating cold food and cleaning only when he had the energy. Now the ship felt alive again. The widows moved, with purpose, and their soft voices filled the silence. Still, he kept his guard up. Trust was not given easily in space. On the second day, everything changed. The alarm blared, red lights flashing through the ship. The widow screamed, rushing to the cargo bay. The human's voice shouted from the cockpit, "Pirates, strap in!" Through the window, a black ship appeared from the shadows of an asteroid field. Its hull was scarred, its engines burning red. Symbols of skulls and jagged teeth were painted across the sides. The youngest widow gasped, her voice breaking. "If they take us, they'll sell us again!" The human cursed under his breath. "Not if I can help it." The pirate ship fired, lasers streaking across the dark. The human twisted the controls, the cargo ship jolting hard as shots grazed the hull. The widows fell against the walls, clutching the rails, terror flooding their faces. "Stay down," the human barked. His fingers flew across the panels. "This ship isn't built for fighting, but we can outrun them." The pirates fired again, this time closer. Sparks flew inside the ship as metal groaned. The widows screamed, one covering her ears, another dropping to her knees. The human grit his teeth. "Come on, faster." He pushed the engines to their limit. The ship shook, engines whining in protest. The stars blurred as they sped forward, weaving between massive rocks of the asteroid field. The pirates followed, their ship larger, faster, built for hunting. They laughed over open comms, their voices cruel. "Run, little human, run while you can. Those widows will fetch a high price on the slave markets." The widows froze, their worst fears confirmed. They weren't after the cargo, they were after them. The oldest widow's hands trembled as she whispered, "We'll be taken again. We'll lose everything again." But then something changed. The human turned to them, his eyes sharp, voice like steel. "Not while I'm here. Not while you're under my watch." The widows blinked, stunned. No one had ever spoken for them like that. No one had ever said, "You're safe with me." The human jerked the ship sharply, diving into a cluster of spinning asteroids. The pirates followed, firing wildly. Rocks shattered into dust, chunks spinning dangerously close. The widows held their breath, certain they would all die crushed between stone and fire. "Hold on!" the human shouted. His hands moved like lightning, twisting the ship through impossible gaps, engines screaming. The widows clung to each other, their hearts racing. Suddenly, the middle widow shouted, "Wait, that star map!" She pointed at the navigation screen, recognizing an old chart she had once seen with her late husband. "There's a hollow asteroid here, a tunnel through it. If we reach it, they won't expect it." The human glanced at her, shocked. "You're sure?" "Yes," she cried. "I swear it." Without hesitation, the human turned the ship toward her direction. The pirates laughed louder, thinking he was trapped. But then the ship slipped into a narrow tunnel carved through a massive asteroid. Darkness swallowed them, and the pirate ship roared past, missing the entrance completely. The widows gasped, tears in their eyes. The ship burst out the other side of the asteroid, safe, the pirate ship now searching wildly behind them. The human let out a deep breath. "You were right," he said, turning to the middle widow. "You saved us." She shook, both from fear and pride. "I only remembered something my husband showed me long ago." The youngest widow hugged her tightly, whispering, "You saved us all." The human gave a rare smile. "Seems you're more than just cleaners and cooks." The widows stared at him, realizing he truly saw them, not as curses, not as burdens, but as people with worth. For the first time in so long, their hearts felt light. But as the stars grew quiet again, the human's smile faded. He knew one thing: the pirates would not give up. They had seen the widows. They would come again. And next time, the danger would be even greater. The cargo ship drifted quietly now, far from the asteroid field. The hum of the engines was steady, but the widows still shook from what had just happened. The pirate voices echoed in their heads, cruel words about selling them again. Yet the human's promise, "Not while I'm here," still gave them strength. The human walked into the small mess hall where the widows sat huddled together, whispering. He set a mug of water on the table. "You did well today." His eyes fell on the middle widow. "That map you remembered saved us. Without you, we'd be in chains." She looked down, embarrassed. "It was nothing, just something my husband once taught me." "It wasn't nothing," the human said firmly. "It saved lives." The other widows nodded, pride in their eyes for the first time in years. They were used to being mocked, treated as curses, worthless. To hear real praise, it felt strange, almost unreal. Later, while the human worked on repairs in the engine room, the oldest widow quietly walked in. She watched him struggle with a damaged power coil. Sparks flew, his face lit with frustration. Finally, she stepped closer. "May I?" He frowned. "You know engines?" She nodded slowly. "My husband was an engineer. I used to help him. Nothing big. But I learned enough." Skeptical, the human stepped aside. The widow rolled up her torn sleeves and carefully adjusted the wiring. Her hands were steady, practiced. Within minutes, the flickering light steadied, and the coil purred back to life. The human blinked. "Well, I'll be damned." The widow stepped back, her face glowing faintly with pride. "I told you, we can work. We are not curses." That night, the youngest widow sat by the cockpit window, staring at the stars. The human walked in quietly, watching her. She was the smallest of the three, often the most frightened, but her eyes burned with curiosity now. "You like the stars?" he asked. She nodded shyly. "I always wanted to travel. My husband used to trade goods. He taught me many languages, so I could help him talk to aliens from other worlds. But after he died, no one wanted to hear me speak again. They only wanted me silent." The human tilted his head. "Languages?" She smiled nervously. "I can speak 8. Maybe 9 if I practice." The human's eyes widened. 9 languages? He let out a low whistle. "Do you realize how rare that is? I've been cheated on half my trades because I couldn't understand the local tongue, and here you are hiding this talent." The widow lowered her gaze, her smile fading. It's not a talent anyone wanted. Not anyone out there, the human said softly. But it's something I want. Her eyes flickered with surprise. No one had ever said such words to her. By the third day of their journey, the human had begun to see each widow differently. They weren't just survivors clinging to scraps of mercy. They were capable, skilled, and stronger than they knew. The middle widow navigated with surprising accuracy, recognizing patterns in old star maps. The oldest repaired more than the power coil. She adjusted cooling systems, patched cracked wires, and tightened loose bolts. The youngest helped him, bargain with a passing fuel station, switching tongues so fast that the station master gave them a discount without realizing it. The ship ran smoother than it had in years. For the first time, the human felt he wasn't alone. But danger was never far. As they neared the colony station, strange signals appeared on the radar. The human frowned. Pirates again. They've been tracking us. The widows froze, fear flooding back. The human leaned back in his chair, thinking fast. We can't fight. But maybe we can outsmart them. His eyes shifted toward the widows. You three have more to give than you think, and I'm going to need it. The oldest spoke first. What can we do? We are not soldiers. You don't need to be, the human said. You just need to use what you already know. He explained his plan. The middle widow would guide them through uncharted shortcuts in the star maps, routes so dangerous only her memory of the old miners' paths could help. The oldest would make quick adjustments in the engine room, boosting speed without burning the coils. The youngest would fake a radio transmission in a pirate dialect, tricking their pursuers into chasing a false signal. At first, they hesitated. Fear was heavy in their bones, but the human's confidence lit something inside them. Slowly they nodded. When the pirate ship reappeared, its weapons glowing, the trap was set. The middle widow called out coordinates, her voice steady despite shaking hands. The human steered sharply, following paths through asteroid storms and collapsing stars. The pirate struggled to keep up. The oldest widow boosted the engines, her hands blackened with grease, sweat dripping from her forehead. Engines holding? She shouted. Meanwhile, the youngest spoke into the radio, her voice low and perfect in the pirate's own tongue. Target sighted in Sector 7. Follow quickly! The pirate ship, believing the false transmission, turned away in the wrong direction. Their laughter and threats faded into the void. The widows collapsed into their seats, breathing heavily. The human looked at them, pride clear in his eyes. You did it. You saved us again. Tears filled their eyes. For so long they had been told they were worthless, cursed. But now, twice in a row, they had proved otherwise. The human leaned forward. Remember this. You are not bad luck. You're the best crew I've ever had. The widows stared at him, hearts pounding with a strange, powerful warmth. For the first time in years, they believed his words. But deep in the galaxy, someone else had heard of their survival. The powerful guild leader, the one who spread the curse stories, had learned the widows were alive and working with a human. His lips curled in anger. So they still breathe, he muttered. Time to finish what I started. The widows had shown their hidden talents, but soon they would learn why the galaxy truly hated them. The cargo ship docked at the colony station, its engines cooling after the long journey. The widows stood close together as the hatch opened, their eyes wide with both fear and excitement. For the first time in months, they stepped onto solid ground, not as beggars, but as crew. The human walked beside them, carrying the delivery list. He noticed how people stared at the widows, whispering just like before. The same words followed them. Cursed, bad luck, stay away. The human's jaw tightened. He was tired of these lies. They finished unloading the food crates and the colony manager signed the papers. Good work, the man said, his voice flat. But then his eyes narrowed at the widows. You should get rid of them, human. They'll ruin you, the human's voice was sharp. They just helped me escape pirates. They saved my ship. If that's ruin, I'll take it. The manager sneered but said nothing more. Later that night, the widows sat in the mess hall, whispering. The youngest asked, why does everyone hate us so much? Even here, far from the mines, the whispers still follow. The oldest sighed. It's the curse. The guild spread it everywhere. No one questions their word. The human leaned against the wall, arms crossed. The guild? Explain. The widows looked at each other nervously, then the middle one spoke. Our husbands worked in the mines. Everyone said the accident was just bad luck. But it wasn't. They found something in the tunnels, something valuable. Rare crystals, pure and glowing. Worth a fortune. The human's eyes narrowed. Crystals? So the guild covered it up? Yes, the widow whispered. The guild leader wanted it for himself, but our husbands knew the truth. They told us everything. If people found out the accident was caused by sabotage, the guild would lose everything. So the guild killed them and called it a collapse. The youngest's voice shook as she added, "We tried to speak, but no one listened. Instead, the guild spread lies. They said widows of the mines carry bad luck, that anyone who helps us will suffer, and people believed." Tears slid down her cheeks. They destroyed our names, our lives, and our hope. The human felt anger burn inside him. He had seen corruption before, but this was worse. Not only had the guild murdered innocent men, they had condemned the widows to a life of misery to keep the truth buried. He spoke firmly. "You're not cursed. You're witnesses. That's why they want you silent." The oldest widow looked at him with wide eyes. "And you hired us. That means now you're in danger too." The human smirked, though his eyes were cold. "I've been in danger before. I'm still here." The next day, his words proved true. When the human returned from buying supplies, he found the widows cornered by 3 armed strangers in the docking bay. The men wore black jackets marked with the guild symbol. Their leader sneered. "There they are. The cursed widows. The guild sends its greetings." The widows trembled, pressing against the wall. The youngest whispered, "They found us." The human stepped forward, his hand resting on the blaster at his belt. "They're under my protection." The leader laughed. "Then you'll die with them. Do you even know what you're protecting? They're liars. Their husbands were fools. Forget them, and you can walk away." The human's voice was like steel. "No, you walk away." The strangers reached for their weapons, but the human moved first. In a flash, he fired a warning shot into the ground, the blast scorching the metal floor. The sound echoed through the bay, turning heads. The guild men froze. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then the leader spat. "This isn't over. The guild doesn't forgive. You'll regret this." They retreated, but their eyes promised blood. When they were gone, the widows collapsed into the human's arms, shaking. The middle widow whispered, "Why do you risk this for us? You could leave us and be safe." The human looked at them, his expression hard. "Because it's wrong. They killed your husbands, then cursed your names to hide their crimes. If no one fights back, they'll keep winning. And I don't like bullies." The oldest touched his arm, her voice breaking. "You don't understand. The guild is powerful. They control half the colonies. 1 human against them." "Not 1, he interrupted. 4, we're a crew now." The widows stared at him, stunned. No one had ever called them that before. A crew, partners, family. But even as hope lit their hearts, fear lingered. The guild knew where they were now. The whispers of the curse were only the surface. The real war had just begun. That night, as the ship prepared to leave the colony, the human stood at the cockpit window watching the stars. His jaw was tight, his mind sharp. The widows sat behind him, whispering softly. He spoke without turning. "We'll find proof. We'll show the colonies what the guild really is. Once the truth is out, their lies won't matter anymore." The middle widow's voice trembled. "If we fail, they'll kill us." The human glanced back, his eyes steady. "Then we won't fail." The widows exchanged glances. For the first time since their husbands' deaths, they felt something stronger than fear. They felt purpose. But in the shadows of the galaxy, the guild leader sat in his grand chamber, eyes glowing with fury. Reports of the widow's survival and the human's defiance lay on his desk. He crushed the papers in his hand, his voice low and deadly. "Find them, hunt them, and this time, make sure they never rise again." The truth had been revealed, and now the battle to survive it had begun. The cargo ship lifted from the colony station under the cover of night. Its engines hummed low, carrying the human and the 3 widows into the dark sea of stars. Inside, the mood was heavy. No one laughed. No one whispered. Fear pressed down on them like a shadow. The widows sat in the mess hall, holding each other's hands tightly. The youngest asked in a trembling voice, "Will they come for us again?" The human's voice answered from the cockpit, steady but sharp. "Not if when. The guild won't stop now. They know you survived, and they know you're with me. They'll send ships. They'll send assassins. We can't just keep running. We need a plan. The widows looked at him with wide eyes when he returned from the controls. He stood tall, his face set with determination. We can't fight them head on. They're too strong, but we can outsmart them. We're going to disappear, then strike back. The oldest frowned. Disappear? How? The human tapped the side of his head. Space is wide. Too wide for even the guild to watch everywhere. There are dead zones. Uncharted nebulae, broken stations, forgotten asteroid colonies. Places they won't dare chase us. We'll hide there, gather proof, then show the colonies the truth about the mining accident. The middle widow whispered. But how do we gather proof? The guild destroyed everything. The human's eyes narrowed. Not everything. Someone always keeps records. Someone always talks. We just need to live long enough to find them. The widows shivered. Hope flickered in their hearts, but so did terror. The next days were a blur of hiding and running. The humans steered the ship through empty asteroid belts, dark trade lanes, and drifting wrecks. They traveled with lights off, running silent, their ship blending into the cold of space. But no matter where they went, the guild was close behind. Twice they spotted shadows on the radar, fast ships hunting them. Once they barely escaped a blockade at a fuel station, slipping out through an old maintenance shaft. Another time, assassins disguised as traders tried to board their ship, but the human fought them off with swift, brutal skill. Each attack left the widows shaken, but the human never wavered. He kept moving, kept planning. One night, while the widows slept, the human sat alone in the cockpit. His eyes were heavy, but his mind burned. He thought of the laughter in the marketplace, the guild's lies, and the terror in the widow's eyes. He clenched his fists. I won't let them break you again, he whispered to the stars. The widows, though afraid, also began to change. The oldest spent hours in the engine room, improving the ship's systems. She learned to squeeze more power from the engines without overheating them. The middle widow mapped secret routes using her memory of old miners' charts. She plotted paths even smugglers wouldn't dare. The youngest practiced her languages, recording fake transmissions to confuse their hunters. Together, they became more than survivors. They became a crew, but the guild's reach was long. On the 5th day of running, alarms blared. 3 guild ships appeared on the radar, closing in fast. The widows rushed into the cockpit, panic flooding their faces. They found us, the youngest cried. The human's jaw tightened. They were bound to, but this time we're ready, he explained quickly. We'll lure them into the red mist nebula. Sensors don't work in there. Visibility is near zero. If we move fast and clever, we'll vanish. They'll lose us or crash trying to find us. The widows gasped. The red mist nebula was a place of ghost stories where ships entered and never returned. The middle widow shook her head. It's suicide. The human looked at her, calm but unyielding. So is waiting here for them to catch us. The widows hesitated. Then, one by one, they nodded. The ship dived into the nebula. Red clouds of gas swallowed them, glowing like fire. Lightning flashed within the mist, striking dangerously close. The widows clung to their seats, eyes wide with terror. The guild ships followed, their engines burning bright. Over comms, their voices jeered. No one escapes the guild, not you. Not them. The human's hands danced over the controls, weaving the ship through the storm. The middle widow guided him with sharp directions, her voice steady. The oldest adjusted the engines, squeezing out bursts of speed. The youngest transmitted false signals in alien codes, making it seem like their ship was in 3 places at once. The guild ships grew confused, their radar scrambled. One crashed into an asteroid hidden in the mist, exploding in fire. Another fired blindly, hitting its own ally. The human pushed the engines to the limit, sweat dripping from his brow. The ship shook violently, sparks flying. The widows held their breath, praying silently. Then suddenly silence. The radar cleared. The guild ships were gone. They had escaped. The widows cried out with relief, tears streaming down their faces. They hugged each other tightly. The youngest whispered, "We survived, again." "We survived." The human leaned back, his chest heaving. He glanced at them and gave a small, tired smile. "You did more than survive. You fought back. Remember that." But even as the widows smiled through their tears, the human's eyes darkened. He knew the guild wouldn't stop. This was only the beginning. He looked out into the glowing mist, his voice low. "Next time we don't just run. Next time we make them pay." The widows turned to him, fear and hope mixing in their eyes. For the first time, they didn't just see a rescuer. They saw a leader, and together they began to dream of something more than escape. They began to dream of justice. The cargo ship drifted out of the red mist nebula, scarred but alive. Inside, silence hung heavy. The widows sat close together, their bodies still trembling from the narrow escape. The human stood at the cockpit window staring out into the endless stars. "We can't keep running forever," he said finally, his voice calm but sharp. "The guild won't stop. Not until you're dead, or until the truth is louder than their lies." The oldest widow's hands trembled. "But how can we fight them? They are powerful. They own stations, ships, whole colonies." The human turned, his eyes steady. "Power means nothing if people stop believing in them. All we need is proof." The middle widow leaned forward, whispering, "There is proof. My husband once kept records, maps, logs, notes about the crystals they found. Before he died, he told me he hid them in the mines, deep in the tunnels." The human nodded slowly. "Then that's where we're going," the widows gasped. To return to the mines was to return to the place of death, the place of nightmares. But something inside them shifted. For the first time in years, they weren't just running from the past, they were ready to face it. The journey back to the mining colony was long and dangerous. Guild patrols circled every trade lane, but the widow's skills guided them safely through. The middle widow mapped hidden paths. The youngest tricked patrols with false transmissions, and the oldest kept the ship alive with her repairs. By the time they reached the mines, they were no longer just passengers. They were crew. The colony looked abandoned, but danger still lingered. Rusted gates loomed like broken teeth, and the air smelled of dust and ash. The widow stepped onto the ground with shaking legs, memories flooding back of husbands' voices, laughter, and then screams. Tears burned their eyes, but they walked forward. Inside the tunnels, they searched by flickering light. The air was heavy, the silence crushing. Every sound echoed like ghosts whispering. Finally, the middle widow stopped, kneeling by a broken wall. Her hands moved over the stone. "Here," she whispered. He hid it here. Together, they pried the stones loose. Beneath them lay a metal box, rusted but intact. The human pulled it free and opened it. Inside were data chips, old logbooks, and a small crystal that glowed faintly in the dark. The widows gasped. Their husband's final truth was here. The human plugged the chip into his wrist console. Holographic records flickered into the air, maps of crystal veins, reports of sabotage, evidence of explosives planted in the mines before the so-called accident. It was undeniable, proof that the guild had murdered men and destroyed families to claim wealth for themselves. The widows stared at the glowing words and maps, their tears falling freely. "They died for this," the oldest whispered. "And we lived in shame because of their lies." The human closed the box firmly. "No more. Now we show the galaxy." But as they turned to leave, shadows moved in the tunnels. Guild soldiers stepped from the darkness, blasters raised. At their front stood the guild leader himself, tall, dressed in dark robes, his face twisted with hate. "So it's true," he sneered. "The cursed widows still breathe, and a fool of a human thinks he can save them." He spat on the ground. "That evidence dies here, and so do you." The widows froze, hearts pounding. The human, however, stepped forward, his eyes cold. "No, it ends with you." The leader raised his hand to signal his men, but before he could, the youngest widow shouted in a voice that echoed through the tunnels, strong in a dozen alien languages at once. "Help us. The guild is here. They killed the miners." Her words carried across the open comms, transmitted to every nearby station, every passing ship. The guild soldiers froze, realizing the broadcast was live. The human fired first. Chaos erupted. Blaster fire lit the tunnels as echoes of war shook the ground. The widows ducked for cover, the oldest tossing a fuel can into the flames, creating an explosion that sent rocks crashing down. The middle guided the human through the smoke, her memory of the tunnels leading them around traps. The youngest screamed more warnings in alien tongues, spreading the truth even as shots rang out. By the end, the guild soldiers lay defeated under rubble and fire. The guild leader, wounded, tried to crawl away, but the human stood over him. Blaster aimed. "You called them cursed," the human said coldly. "But you were the curse all along." The leader spat blood. "The guild will never die." The human shook his head. "It already has." And he pulled the trigger. When they returned to the ship, the widows were trembling, their faces pale. But when they looked at the stars, their fear turned to awe. Messages were already spreading. Ships hailed them, voices calling out, "Is it true? Did the guild cause the collapse?" The human uploaded the full proof, sending it across networks, stations, and colonies. The truth spread like fire. The guild's power crumbled within days. The widows stood together on the ship's deck, tears streaming down their faces. For years they had been cursed, mocked, and broken. Now they were free. Heroes. The human turned to them, his voice softer now. "You don't owe me anything. But if you want, this ship can be your home. You're not beggars anymore. You're my crew." The widows looked at him, their hearts full. The oldest whispered, "You gave us work. But more than that. You gave us back our lives." The youngest added through tears, "You gave us a future." And for the first time since the mines collapsed, they smiled, not with sorrow but with hope. The ship lifted once more into the stars, not as a place of exile, but as a place of rebirth. The widows stood at the window, watching the galaxy open before them. They were no longer cursed. They were free, and beside the human they were ready to begin again.